Hi, Professor Sills here from sunny and probably still too warm South Florida. And what I want to do is spend a little bit of time with you, with you this morning, talk about Chapter 15, and also start by asking this of you. I posted by email about a week and a half ago asking who has successfully or unsuccessfully installed ArcView, and I think I got maybe 2 responses. I need better. So if you would be kind enough, even if you respond by email and make the subject ArcView. It's going to make it easier for me to be able to track those emails in particular. That way I will know how many people successfully got it installed and how many people didn't. And either way, whether it's successful or unsuccessful, forgive me, whether it's successful or unsuccessful, I would like to know what your operating system is, whether it is XP, Vista, or System 7. And I would like to know whether you're running 32-bit or 64-bit. And again, if you don't know whether it's 32 or 64, you probably have 32. Those who have 64 know they have 64. Okay? So let me grab my coffee and sit up a little bit. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Chapter 15. Now you have an exam coming up. Your exam is coming up, I believe it's October 10, and I'm recording this on October 1. So my advice is the next week and a half, get caught up, do what you got to do, make this happen, because there's only going to be about 3 exams during the semester, maybe 4, and that's what I base the majority of the grade on. I want to know what you know. The exams are not open book. They're not open book. I don't want you using the book during the exam. I want you to know your stuff. I'm not going to ask you a lot of memorization questions. I'm going to ask you questions that are focused on the core learnings. Now, you had a Chapter 15 assignment. Chapter 15 is the only chapter in your text that really deals with tropical cyclones. And as you've seen, we've devoted the first third or so of the semester to tropical cyclones. But in the context of that, I have also built in a bit on global atmospheric circulation, a little bit on technology that we use to track weather, and that would be independent of whether it's tropical or non-tropical weather. But certainly after the exam, we're going to turn our attention to non-tropical weather. So here we go. Here's Chapter 15. I'm simply going to read the questions. I'm going to offer my insights, and I'm going to do it in a way that I'm going to encourage you from time to time to pause the video and think about your answer. If you have not answered that question or were unable to answer it, I may give you a little bit of a hint, and then start the video back up and take it from there. Okay? So here we go. Question 5 on page 436, and again, we're using the 9th edition. I'm hoping that's what you got of the textbook. Why are skies often clear to partly cloudy in a hurricane's eye? Well, let's think about this. Air can be moving in really one of 2 directions that we don't really perceive. Air can rise or air can sink. When air is rising, which we call rising motion, that motion tends to result in the air mass expanding, cooling, to sound technical, we'll say cooling adiabatically, and then the result is the formation of clouds and, of course, precipitation. So whenever you have clouds and precipitation occurring, it's got to happen with rising air. If you have subsiding air, sinking air, now we're talking about the opposite process occurring, which results in any clouds, which are nothing more than condensed water vapor and dust, evaporating. The dust doesn't evaporate, but the condensed water vapor does. So if you have clear to partly cloudy skies in the eye of a hurricane, what must the air be doing? Well, the answer is the air must be sinking. Think of a hurricane, and this is what it is a giant cluster of thunderstorms that are spiraling about a center. It's a heat engine. Those thunderstorms exist because they are rising air. Think of what a thunderstorm is. It occurs within cumulonimbus clouds, which are noted for having large billowy appearance. That means the air must be rising. Well, where you see clear skies, what nobody ever stops to think about is the air must be sinking. McDonald's coffee, no sugar, no cream, and yes, I drink a fair amount of it. Okay, so number 8. Hurricanes are sometimes described as a heat engine. What is the fuel that drives the hurricane, and what determines the maximum strength, highest winds the storm can achieve? Well, to a great degree, that fuel would be warm water. You now know from the ArcView exercises, from the reading in the manual, from watching my videos in the ArcView debriefings, so even if you didn't get ArcView installed, you're able to watch the debriefings. You now know that that heat engine is warm water, and the magic temperature seems to be about 80 degrees Fahrenheit. When the water is north of 80 degrees Fahrenheit, that's when tropical storms can form and strengthen. Okay? Form and strengthen. Now, how strong will they get? Water temperature is only one factor. There's, of course, wind shear, and there are other factors that may influence, but let's just go with water temperature and wind shear. If wind shear is not favorable, the tops of the clouds get blown off. That's what wind shear really is. It's the twisting and turning of winds and the increase of wind speed, particularly with elevation. So if it's windy aloft, what do I mean by aloft? 15,000 feet, 30,000 feet, 50,000 feet in the atmosphere, then the cloud tops get blown off, and what you end up with is the system is unable to really form, intensify, and strengthen. Intensify and strengthen are really the same phrase. Okay, so moving right along, number 11. What factors tend to weaken hurricanes? Well, certainly making landfall. Every hurricane I've ever seen that makes landfall weakens. Why? Ground friction. Another one would be wind shear, and another one would be cold water. So that when they begin to work their way northward, you're going to encounter cold water, and inevitably every hurricane that works its way into the mid-latitudes and north weakens. Distinguish from tropical depression, tropical storm, and hurricane. Different grades of the same thing. A hurricane has achieved a wind speed continuously in some area around it of 75 miles per hour or more. A tropical storm, 39, and it gets named below that tropical depression. We've certainly had a bunch of them this year. I believe we're up to letter P at this point. Why do most hurricanes move westward over tropical waters? Well, from what you learned about atmospheric circulation, there is rising air at the equator. That air has to go somewhere. It's going to move towards the poles. As it moves towards the poles, the Coriolis effect causes it to curve. Well, the air that returns to the equator is returning towards the equator, but curving in a way, and the camera is throwing me off, that creates the northeasterly trade winds. So the trade winds, and they were so named, I mean, this goes back hundreds of years, where mariners figured out that if you were leaving Europe and you wanted to make your way to the New World, you had to get into the trade belt, which was where the trade winds were, and they would push you westward. Those are the same winds that push a storm westward. So they are blowing from east to west. Now, the Coriolis effect also causes these storms to begin to curve northward, and when they curve northward, they get into the westerlies, which are the mid-latitude wind belt, causing things primarily to move from west to east. So, whatever. Again, camera makes everything opposite here. You get it. If you don't get it, go back over what I just said, have a map in front of you, and draw it out. Okay? Northeasterly trade winds in the tropics, westerlies in the mid-latitudes, and for that matter, when you get north of the mid-latitudes, polar easterlies. Roughly, what are the boundary zones? About 30 degrees latitude separates the tropics from the mid-latitudes, and about 60 degrees latitude separates the mid-latitudes from the polar regions. Okay? And I hope you're taking notes on this, and I hope you're comparing your answers to mine as I go through this. So, number 14, why do most hurricanes move westward over tropical waters? Just talked about that. Number 15, if the high winds of a hurricane are not responsible for inflicting the most damage, what is? Storm surge. Period. Storm surge. Look it up, understand it, and understand why it's such a big deal. All right, explain how the storm surge forms. How does it inflict damage in hurricane-prone areas? Well, storm surge forms from really a prevailing wind. The winds are at high velocity. They've got a long fetch. They're blowing over a large portion of water, and they're pushing water. When that water meets land, something's got to give. The water is going to push inland and eventually run out of steam. Also, the subsurface becomes more shallow, so the waves are going to get bigger, and that surge of water, which can be 10, 20, 30 feet in a very, very strong storm, will cause a tremendous amount of damage. Go back and reread the description that was given by, what was his name, Isaac Klein of the Galveston storm of 1900, and read how the water came up in what period of time. All right, take some time on that. Go back and take a look at that. Hurricanes are given names. They're given names in their tropical storm stage. All right, when they reach that. Watchable warning. This is important. Watches generally mean, whether it's a hurricane watch or a winter storm watch or a heavy snow watch, a tornado watch, the conditions are favorable for within the next 24 to 36 hours. The conditions are favorable for. There is the reasonable possibility of. A watch means be on the lookout. It's not a guarantee, it's not a done deal, it's not guaranteed it's going to happen, but it means be on the lookout. A warning, it's coming. It's coming, and it's coming imminently. So if you get under a watch, that's a good time to prepare. If you're under a warning, you should have prepared already. Now, of course, tornadoes are a little different, because tornadoes, we do not have the ability to predict in advance by very far, 10 minutes, and that's a little bit different. Tornado warning means one has been sighted, and of course at that point there's not much you can do if you happen to be in the tornado's path, and if you're in a part of the country where you can seek shelter in a storm shelter, you do it. We don't have storm shelters in New Jersey because tornadoes are not a super common phenomena, and the ones that New Jersey experiences tend to be what are called EF0 or EF1. That's the enhanced Fujita scale. The Fujita scale is something akin to the Saffir-Simpson scale for hurricanes, where a 1 would be weak and a 5 would be extremely strong. Okay, questions for thought. Why are North Atlantic hurricanes more apt to form in October than in May? Ever been to the water in May? It's cold. So it takes time for water to warm up. It is now that the water is about as warm as it's going to be, between roughly Labor Day and now. Obviously, the temperatures in New Jersey are on their way down. You must have noticed that by now. Well, the water temperatures will follow. Water temperatures lag by a few weeks, and the warmest waters are observed in September, which it's no surprise then that September 10 should be the statistical peak of the hurricane season. All right, would it be possible for a hurricane to form during December? The answer is not likely, and again, that's based on water temperature. All right, again, not likely based on water temperature. Would the winds of a hurricane decrease as it moves over cooler water or warmer land? I'm going to go with, I apologize for the screaming in the background. Like I say, I'm in a McDonald's, and you never know what's going to happen. I'm going to go with land here. Why? Friction. Friction is a more powerful force than temperature. If you've got a strong storm, well, then what's going to happen is that storm is certainly going to, gradually weaken if it stays out over water. When it hits land, That's it. Party over. And of course, if it's moving quickly, that will allow it to get further inland before it truly collapses and breaks down. There are even rare cases where Toronto, Canada has experienced hurricane force winds from a hurricane that initially made landfall in the Gulf of Mexico around Louisiana. But it would be moving at 60 to 80 miles an hour or more, so that the storm would have retained its strength by the time it reached Toronto, Canada. Take a look at a map and you'll see what I'm talking about. Draw a straight line between Louisiana and Toronto, Canada, and you'll realize that if the storm is moving fast enough, it can reach it. All right? After the passage of a hurricane, there is a decrease in the surface temperature. And just think of it this way. It's been described to me as this: the plunger effect. All right? Imagine taking a toilet plunger into your toilet. Well, it's going to disturb the surface waters. The surface waters are going to get churned up. So what happens? Even in the tropics, you go down 20, 30, 40 feet, you're going to find cooler water. That cooler water gets brought up to the surface, and that's what causes things to get cooler at the surface. So it's very hard for another storm to really follow the exact same path as an initial storm, and if it does, it will not strengthen. All right, with that, with all the screaming and everything else, I hope this has been of help to you. You have a great day.